Reverend Al Sharpton, 1-877-532-5797. Taking your calls around the country. Charles Ellison of TheRoot.com still with me. Charles, I got a call early this morning from Ben Jealous, former president of the NAACP. When he was there, he worked very closely with me as head of National Action Network and with Mark Morial of the Urban League. He called in for me. He was announcing today, and he has, that he's running for the governor of Maryland. And because I've known him a long time, in fact, when he was a youngster going to Columbia University in New York, he was arrested, went to jail with me when I was leading marches against police brutality and Amadou Diallo. Handicap the race for me.
Sure. You know what? And Reverend, I appreciate that too. You know, I live in Maryland, just disclaimer there, point of disclaimer. And I live in one of the largest counties in Maryland, in Prince George's County. And so, and he's going to need Prince George's County if to win the Democratic primary.
Isn't the county executive of Prince George running also, though?
You know, I've heard that. I've heard whispers of that, and I've actually been to a few fair events where the county executive, Sharon Baker, is there, and people are, you know, sort of half joking around, calling him the next governor of Maryland. So he's been planning and mapping that out very quietly. And, you know, I was one of a very few folks who, months before that 2014 election was called, you know, I had predicted that Larry Hogan would win. Larry Hogan is a very clever, very cunning, very masterful political strategist. He's someone that you cannot, the current governor of Maryland, a Republican, you should not underestimate. Now, right now, Ben is seeing something in the air. He's looking at those latest polls, which show that Larry Hogan's very high approval ratings in the state have slipped a little bit, you know, from like 71% last September to about 65% now. And there are a lot of voters who are on the fence about whether or not they're going to re-elect Hogan as governor. So, you know, so Ben is still a little bit confident there, but Ben has to take two things into consideration. One is that Democratic primary. Maryland is a big political machine state. Democrats in Maryland they're not creative. They're very conventional campaigners. That's why Lieutenant Governor Anthony Brown lost against Larry Hogan. Could have became the first black governor back in 2014, but he lost because he was a very conventional, very non-creative campaigner. And Republicans who run statewide in Maryland seem to be a little bit more creative, like Larry Hogan was. So, you know, what Ben has to do is, when he's got to get through that Democratic primary, he's got to get the blessing from the Democratic political machine in Maryland. And two, he's really going to have to go after those voters, those white voters in the western side of the state, if he wins the Democratic primary. Those white voters in the western side of the state and white voters in suburban Baltimore and D.C., suburban Maryland areas like Anne Arundel County, Baltimore County, Montgomery County, and that remains to be seen. You know, Hogan is still very popular in a lot of those white suburban enclaves, and he's even popular amongst a few black folks. Not a whole bunch, but enough that could pose a real problem for Ben if he becomes the Democratic nominee in 2018.
All right, let's go to the phone. Milton Taylor in Chicago, WBON.
Yeah, nice to talk to you, Al.
Nice talking to you.
My mother, I don't believe my mother ever told me any lie, you know. So she always told me that it takes two fools to fight. So, you know, and I believe that the white man is the most violent person on earth, because back in the Roman days, they built stadiums and coliseums to fight in to the death. And then after, you know, the winner would fight, you know, animals, lions and tigers, you know, that they imported from Africa, you know. So, you know, violence, you know, is taught, you know. It's not, people are born loving, you know, the black man.
Well, let me say this. Thank you for your call. Let me say this to that. Dr. Martin Luther King said in 1965, my producer Fatim pulled this up, quote, "We've created a crisis the nation couldn't ignore without violence. We totally disrupted the system, the lifestyle of Birmingham, and then Selma, with their unjust and unconstitutional laws, which led, as you know, to a civil rights bill and a voting rights bill. Creative tension is what Dr. King said. And let me tell you something. I've seen fights, nonviolent fights, that have resulted in laws changing. I've seen fights that lost. And I have seen riots that got us killed and people locked up. I've not seen riots that got us anything other than maybe pacifying us, giving us some fire hydrants. So even, and that's to cool you off. So even tactically, I don't see it. But practically and morally, I refuse to become what I'm fighting. I just won't do it. There's a vote getting ready to happen any moment now about AB 284 in California about special prosecutors. What I spent 2 days out there last week. We got the appropriations chairman to put it to the floor. They're voting on it. And I'm getting text messages from our San Diego chapter president, Shane Harris. As soon as the vote happens in California, I will let you know. Very, very, very important that we understand struggles are one step-by-step fighting things like state legislations pieces at a time. So as our chapters of NAN out in California is dealing with AB 284. We met this morning with the governor of New York on dealing with the